The realities of sleep with a newborn often just don't quite hit home until you're there. So this episode is here to help save you from some of the pressure and anxiety I put myself under around sleep in the first 6 months. I am really looking forward to speaking today with two amazing women, Jem and Eve.
It's okay to reach out for support, to acknowledge that it's difficult. And I think as mothers, we put so much pressure on ourselves to be and do everything because it is the most important job. So we want to win, we want to succeed in it.
And I wish there was something we could give parents to take the pressure off, but we were so busy that we could never do anything with it. And I do remember her saying, wouldn't it be amazing with all the pressure that the incredible NHS is under, if somebody had a plan that wasn't a plan, that was go easy on yourself, here's what you can do, but also don't worry about it, it'll be fine.
Hello, I'm Pip, and welcome to the Midwife Pip podcast, the home of expert information and real chats on all things pregnancy, birth, and beyond. The realities of sleep with a newborn often just don't quite hit home until you're there. And if you checked out my most searched terms as a new first-time mum, they would almost exclusively have been sleep related. So this episode is here to help save you from some of the pressure and anxiety I put myself under around sleep in the first 6 months. I am really looking forward to speaking today with two amazing women, Jem and Eve, founders of Calm and Bright Sleep Support, who I am honestly so grateful to because they saved us in the depth of sleep deprivation with our first son. And it's something I really wish I had had more information on before we hit that place of utter exhaustion. So welcome, ladies. And I know we were just talking about how you are just blooming heroes in the lives of so many parents. But welcome. Thank you so much for coming on to chat with me today.
Thank you for having
us.
Oh, I love it. Like sisters and literally just echoing each other there. I love it. Now, one of the things I would love to jump straight into with you guys is sleep expectations and kind of keeping it a bit real, because I think one of the things that sets us up to fail almost, especially when you have no experience with babies and sleep, is when you think of or Google a baby, they're always asleep in a cot, looking beautiful and peaceful. I mean, it just doesn't always happen like that, does it?
It really doesn't. And I think it's so important that we set expectations about the fact that broken sleep in the early months is biologically normal. And I think if we set ourselves up to think that sleep will be solid from the start, it's just not realistic. And it's really hard for new parents anyway. The lack of sleep deprivation is enough for it to be hard enough without thinking that our babies should be doing something that they're not programmed to do.
I love that. And I was saying before we hit record is it was the thing that was the biggest challenge for me and my husband. And it was a genuine, serious discussion when we were planning a future child. Can we do that again? Like that level of exhaustion in reality with a toddler and another human and work and all of that juggle. Can we actually put ourselves through that again? It was like a genuine, serious conversation because it was really hard, which is why I'm so pleased I found people like you. But one of the things I wanted to really talk to you guys about, because I know it's a focus of the work that you're doing at the moment, is that first 6 months. Because I think historically we've kind of gone into survival mode, let adrenaline carry us through, rode the waves of like utter exhaustion and depletion, and then got to a point of like, oh gosh, we need help, which is definitely what happened to us. But what can we do that first 6 months? What does that look like? And how much can that change for parents? What should they expect?
I think in the first 6 months, as Jem said, having the expectation that you're going to be getting sleep in perhaps 45-minute, 2-hour, 3 hours if you're lucky segments. And I think just knowing that it's going to be really hard for the first sort of 5-6 months is really helpful. It's not to scare, it's to validate. And I also think that if every parent knew, every new parent knew, every expectant parent knew that by the 5 to 6 month mark, 11 to 12 hours are absolutely within reach with perhaps one or two or as many as you want night feeds, you're in control. If you know that it's for a short period of time and you know that you don't have to be pressurized working on routines and getting things right, then you can actually go, do you know what? I'm just here in this moment, knowing that it's going to be hard, but knowing that it's not for a long time in the grand scheme of things. I like to use the analogy of floating in a riptide. You know, you're taught not to swim against it, because if you do, you tire yourself out and you drown. And what we're taught to do is to literally put our heads back, our arms back, and our legs up, and to allow the current to take us so that when we're safe and when it's calmed down, we can swim back to shore safely. So I love that analogy for the first 6 months.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's so
So,
beautiful.
that's so good. That's something I'm absolutely carrying with me. That's
Good,
so
Pip,
relatable,
good.
isn't it? So relatable. And I think, that first 6 months, like you say, I feel like there's so much stigma in some aspects, and sleep is so variable. And you do hear people that are like, oh, from 6 weeks, my baby woke up once, they sleep beautifully. And I'm like, that's really great for you. But I was up every hour.
Yeah.
And it was really, really rough. But what's amazing is that knowing there's an end point, which we
Yeah.
didn't have last time. I was like, I know I reached out to Jem when I think Finley was about 10 months, wasn't he? And I was like, we can't keep going like this.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to
Yeah.
survive as a family.
Yeah.
I was going back to night shift.
Yeah.
And I
And
think once
honestly,
you're,
Pip, I'm so glad you've raised this, because in our nurture plan, we talk about the difficult things, and we talk about the fact that it's normal to miss your old life. It's normal to really struggle with the exhaustion. It's normal when you're navigating through matrescence and the changes that happen, similar to adolescence from a hormones point of view, from an exhaustion point of view, that you can acknowledge that that is very difficult for anyone to navigate through. So it's, even though we can't change things at the time when it's really tough, and setting expectations really helps with that, it's so important, like Eve said, to have that hope that it will get better and this is not permanent and this too shall pass, and knowing what to do when you get to the 5-6 month mark to make those changes. And we speak about this at every baby show. We talk about it in our book Love to Sleep, that it's okay to reach out for support, to acknowledge that it's difficult. And I think as mothers, we put so much pressure on ourselves to be and do everything because it is the most important job. So we want to win, we want to succeed in it. But it's holding space. And I wish someone had told me this when I had my first son, who's 13 now, that it's okay to ride those waves and for it to be tough and beautiful. And you can have those two things simultaneously happen at the same time.
yeah, and you don't have to love that aspect. I feel
Yeah.
like, there's this pressure on mums to do everything and to love everything. And to be like, yeah, I'm exhausted, but it's the best thing ever. And actually, sometimes it's okay to be like, this is really hard, but I know it's normal. And
Yeah.
that's where you're so incredible at empowering parents that, yes, it's really hard and that's okay. But actually, this is understanding why it's hard. And I think often that why piece is really easy to forget, isn't it? Especially in that initial kind of 6 month period. And I think, we have started working through the nurture plan because it was, as I say, part of the agreement, to be honest, having another baby. So we did this bit very differently. So we've started working through it. And I think one of the things that's been really beneficial is to like almost put yourself in the shoes of your baby. Because I think it's because they aren't, I mean, they're vocal, but they're not communicated with you. It's really easy to forget actually their feelings in this crazy world that's very different to the womb and what they are requiring. And I think actually just thinking what are they feeling and actually putting yourself in their shoes can be quite useful in just kind of grounding yourself sometimes when you get really caught up in your head and that one
Yeah.
thing you're really focused on that isn't achievable because your baby's not asleep.
Yeah. And when
I
you're,
think it's so important to, sorry, Jeff.
you go,
I think it's
sis.
so
No, I love hearing
important
you talk about it.
to remember that Gemma talks about the fourth trimester having almost imagining an extension of the umbilical cord for those first 4 months and how everything was on demand. They were actually being rocked as you were walking. They had white noise through the whoosh of the blood through the umbilical cord. And the on-demand thing is a thing. And by the way, that's not us saying you must do this. It's just recommended. And it's our approach is to do everything on demand so that you are building the most secure foundation on which to have the best possible sleep. Because what people fail to realize sometimes, and I certainly did, is that when your baby is the most secure and confident and so wrapped up in your love throughout the day and the night in the first 6 months or so, that when they do come to have separation, and sleep is a form of separation, they're so wrapped up in that blanket of your love that it carries them through, and they're confident enough to wake up and go, oh yeah, I totally know what to do here. I'm completely capable of this. So yeah, thinking about the baby's needs, really important that we remember that sleep is a key fundamental need. So if we want to be need meeting parents, we must include sleep in the equation. It's so often left out.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important to include sleep, your baby's sleep, because, you know, sleep is affects every fiber and function in our bodies. So it's difficult when it's broken and when you can't do anything about that in the early months. Acknowledge that, hold space for that. But when you can do something, you don't have to, but you absolutely can.
I remember a really close friend of mine having a baby several years ago now and saying, Eve, they're 3 weeks old and I can't put them down. What do I do? I'm going to have a baby that can only sleep on me. And I said, don't put them down. You know, you're not supposed to put them down yet, and it's okay not to. It's so important that people know they are not going to create a rod for their own back if they do everything on demand. They really are not. In fact, if you do, it's going to be better sleep later. It's that much of a difference in people's opinions on that part.
That's such an important point, I think, to highlight, because I feel like generationally there's a shift. And I
Mm.
know when our first son was born, very much from our parents, it was, you're gonna have to put him down at some point. You can't just hold him all day. Or like I would have him in the little like wrap carrier. And so he was
Yeah.
essentially always against me because it was just easier. And very much I had that all the time from
Mm.
grandparents. Actually, you're gonna make a rod for him back. He needs to learn to sleep
Mm.
on his own, blah blah. We heard that. And so I feel like actually we're in this generational shift where, thanks to people like you guys and plans like you've got in the nurture plan, actually we're starting to educate ourselves
Yeah.
and empower mums to
Yeah.
actually be instinctive, right? Because our
Yeah.
instincts is to cuddle our
It's
baby.
the instinct. Oh, the mother compass. And Eve and I were just talking about this on something we did recently, but that mother compass, that intuition will not fail you. And when you're tired, you're vulnerable, right? We are so vulnerable when we're tired. And so well-meaning advice from mother-in-laws and friends and people who mean well, that can really impact us. It can make us second guess everything. So tune into that mother compass. And Eve talks so beautifully about this in the book, like drowning out the noise, drowning out anything that doesn't serve you. And I remember Eve giving me this advice when I had Kit, who was my third son. So I thought I had it all figured out, but I had so much different information coming in. And I remember Eve ringing me and saying, I want you to just create in your mind this bubble around you and James and the boys and Kit, and protect that piece. It's so important that you do that, because there's going to be, everyone has got an opinion and people like to scaremonger and they like to tell you their stories. Don't ever feel that you can't pick your baby up and hold them and be with them, because these early months are so fleeting, and it's so important that you do just that so that you don't look back and regret not doing just that.
A really good practical tip when you do get unsolicited advice, and you almost are certainly going to get it. However well intended the meaning is, it can really hurt because you're already sleep deprived. So it's already impacting your confidence and your self-belief and your optimism. So you have a thin skin in the first 6 months. So any comments can really hit home. Because you worry that they might be true. Am I creating a rod for my own back? But a lovely sentence that I used to begin using after my third, again, it took me a few shots to get it to work for me. But when I had some well-meaning advice, oh, they've only just woken up, leave them a bit, or don't they need to do whatever it might be. Or even, shouldn't you go in? They're having a grumble, shouldn't you go into them? And I'm like, no. So a really good practical sentence is, oh, thank you so much. Like, not sarcastically, but genuinely, thank you so much for trying to help. We're really good with what we're doing at the moment, but I really appreciate it. So that's a nice yeah, there's other words I could use of the translation of what we actually mean. You get the
You
gist.
keep them inside. One of the things that I always recommend to parents, whether it's not specific to sleep, because I am in no way ever giving out any sleep advice whatsoever, but in relation to like feeding or birth choices, but I think it really relates to kind of newborn care, is what would you do if no one else ever knew? So I often say to mums that feel really conflicted about like their feeding journey or their birth choices, what decision would you make if no one else ever knew what your choice would be? And I think that's really grounding again in like getting rid of that outside noise, like you say,
I
and
love
actually what's
that.
important to you and your values.
I
Yeah,
love that too.
so true.
Well, we're full of all the advice today. Well done, us. Well
Look
done.
at us.
So those first 6 months, what can parents, aka me and my husband, do to support smoother sleep?
Such a good question. I think so many people listening to this will want to know this. So, the very thing that Eve talked about, the fourth trimester, if you do everything on demand in the fourth trimester, you are setting yourself up for good sleep, good foundations for sleep, because babies don't have melatonin in the first 12 weeks. They haven't developed their circadian rhythm gene. So if we're looking at the science side, actually, babies waking frequently is biologically normal so that they can feed often, and they need support to link in their sleep cycles. If you do that for the first 4 months, when you get to month 5, when you're through the 4-month sleep regression, it just naturally happens. And babies are ready to start learning how to self-settle with your support, with your love. And like Eve said, keeping as many feeds in as you want to. But if you do everything on demand, that is the best foundation. And enabling self-settling and doing that in a responsive way, which is exactly what we do here at Calm and Bright, it shouldn't be too difficult if you do it around the kind of 5, 6, 7 month mark. If anyone said to me, ideally, when would you do it? There's no set time. We support up to age 5. But if you could pick a perfect time, it would be around the 6-month mark. Absolutely. And there's so much that you can do to do that and still keep feeds in, still enjoy contact naps from time to time, and just make your routine serve you.
Yeah, and practically as well, because people are really going to want to know, what can I do? What's tangible to do? And I think doing things on demand, as Jem says, but also the moment that you're feeling able and ready to, is just keeping an eye on the nap gaps is one of the biggest things people can do. So I'm very happy to give out our purchasable online thing for free with you here, Pip, no problem at all. And that is from the 4-week mark, they're only going to want to be awake for about 45 minutes at a time. So at the very beginning, 45 minutes. And that means in that time, you're feeding and changing a nappy. So really no time at all.
Yeah.
And then every month up to the first 12 months thereafter, you simply add 15 minutes. So at the 2-month mark, you're looking at an hour. At the 3-month mark, an hour and 15, and so on and so forth, 2 hours at the 6-month mark. And if you can keep, not on top of, but if you can be aware of those nap gaps, because when they stay awake longer than that, they invariably get a dump of adrenaline and cortisol into their bloodstream, which means they don't appear tired. So, but all the while they're thinking, oh, they're not ready for a sleep yet, they're getting more and more overtired, which makes the settle harder, which makes the sleep less fulfilling, which makes them take shorter naps. So it is your enemy, the overtiredness. That doesn't mean to say, oh my God, we've got to do, it doesn't need to be a big pressurized thing. It's just, this is going to help me. So if we can keep an eye on nap gaps from whenever you want, as early as 4 weeks or as late as 10 or 12 weeks, that's fine too. Because to be honest, I couldn't think about anything other than even washing was a task at the beginning. But when you feel ready, and there's not a time frame on that, you can click into those that little nap gap thing and feed before sleep, not on waking. That's another big myth, that you should do the whole feed them on waking. And it came from a good place, because the people that devised it wanted parents to separate feeding from sleeping so the baby could fall asleep without the boob or the bottle. But what it actually did is it removed all the good points. It threw the baby out with the bathwater, because the reason why we feed before is it relaxes them. Breast milk has a hormone in that will help them feel more relaxed. The same one, by the way, as when we have turkey on Christmas Day, and even bottle feeding as well. The comfort, the closeness, the warmth, the liquid, the digestion kicks in, which makes you sleepy, like after a meal. So we strongly advise to feed before sleep, so that hunger is one less thing to interrupt the nap or the sleep.
That's golden. Thank you for sharing that. And I think,
You're
again,
welcome.
this is like a generational shift, because I mean, overtiredness is something that we are still very aware of with our 2-year-old. Like, it's real, isn't it? And our parents will always say to us, he doesn't need to nap. He's not tired. When children are tired enough, they'll fall asleep. And I think from my mum's perspective, I was one of those kids that would fall asleep in their dinner plate if they were tired, and would just fall asleep wherever I needed to. But I was like, he's not that kind of kid. Like, he's not going to accidentally fall asleep. I promise you. He's not done it in 2 years of his life. And so I think, again, it's that when that's the only influence you've got, I mean, our child probably would have never have napped had he been under the care of his grandparents, because like you say, we went into that overtired, hyper alert, running around like a crazy person. And we're sat there thinking, oh my gosh, you are so in need of sleep. But generationally, they're like, well, how is he tired? He's not tired. He's running around.
Tire them out. That's the other one, isn't it? Tire them out.
Tire them
And you're
out.
like,
And early wakes. If you put them to bed late, they'll wake late. Like, absolutely not. You know, the number one cause for early wakes is overtiredness. We know that. So it's trying to, because there's so much misinformation out there
I
about
do
sleep,
feel sorry
about
for
everything.
people. Like,
So
it's
do
a lot
I.
of it's conflicting, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard.
And like, I really do. And I really feel for parents, which is why I love talking to people like you guys on the podcast, because we were those clueless parents. And I think
We
there
all
was
were.
almost a conception, because I'm a midwife, that I would know this stuff about babies. But I'm like, I work on labour ward. So at the best, I'm great for 2 weeks. And I have no clue. Like, I'm a midwife. I don't know anything about sleep. So
Pip,
we
you're
were
going to
like,
laugh at this. I'm a pediatric nurse. That's my background. I'm a pediatric nurse of 18 years. And when I had my first son, even though I had the guidance of Eve, who had started Calm and Bright, but I wasn't on board then, I thought the reason Toby slept so well was because I was a children's nurse. And I was convinced that that was the reason. And then I had Louis, my second son, he was a very large baby, 10 pounds 3. He had quite a traumatic birth. We had a really difficult time. He had a CMPA, he had a tongue tie, he had reflux. And I remember calling the labour ward as a pediatric nurse, but I was calling as a mother, calling them and saying, he really doesn't sleep at all. And he screams. And I look back now, and it was my friend who answered, who's
Were you phoning up for a return, Jeff?
I was phoning up for a return. And I remember Jack, who is an amazing obstetrician who is still practicing at the hospital where I had Louis. And I remember saying, Jack, I don't know what to do. And he was like, love, it's okay. Like, you've had a difficult time, you're healing. Like, it's normal for babies to wake through the night. And I got off the phone, I'm like, yes, it is actually. And so I'm just trying to explain, like, my logic. There was no logic.
no.
And also, it wasn't actually down to me, because babies have different temperaments, different personalities. So if you're listening to this and you're pregnant with your second, third, fourth, and things throw you a bit, that's okay, because we become a new mother every time we become a mother.
Yeah, that's true. And you've reminded me of something, Jem. I want every person listening to this to know that their worth as a parent, their parent quality rating, if there was such a thing, is not in any way linked to how well their baby sleeps. There are so many factors that are completely outside of our control. It is not a reflection of our worth as parents. Neither is how you feed your baby or any of the other things, how quickly they talk or walk. They are unfortunately not us, not mini us's. They're completely their own people. We just have, if we're lucky, the absolute honor of helping them be the most themselves they can be. And that's not always easy, but that's all we've got to do, and there's no medals or awards.
Love that.
Take that pressure off and get rid of that comparison. Oh my God, it's so easy to fall into the trap of. Now, one of the things that Jem mentioned was sleep regressions. And I know you mentioned that 4-month one briefly then. What's the truth behind regressions? Are they a thing? Because I remember Googling in those early weeks and being like, it's a 6-week regression. It's a 7-week regression. Like, whenever you hit Google, there's a regression at some point if you want to find it.
Oh my gosh.
Jem can tell you about the 4-month, but I just want to give an overview and say that when we're out of control with anything, we like to have labels or reasons because it makes us feel a semblance of control. So when we hear people saying, I'm in the 15-month regression or the 8-month regression, I know in my heart that there isn't such a thing. If first of all, a regression lasts for about 4 weeks max. So any time longer than that, it's not a regression. Secondly, you can have a regression in sleep, but it's not a regression, as in the naps need to change. They're learning a new skill, but that's not a sleep regression per se. I think way too much of the time people attribute issues to sleep regressions. Similarly, as by the way, while I'm on it, they attribute separation anxiety to exhaustion. They don't want to be alone. They're clingy. They're not happy. They're not confident. It must be separation anxiety. No, it's almost certainly that they're exhausted once you've ruled out our little checklist. But my point is that we can so often think that it's something else. It truly isn't. And this is the beautiful news again. And Jem will tell you about the 4-month sleep regression, but because it's really interesting actually. But the hope beacon, which I love to bring, is that even if you have a difficult 4-month sleep regression, and not everyone does, by the 5-month mark, it is done. So any broken sleep that lasts beyond the 5-month mark is not. It might be the remnants of the 4-month sleep regression, but it's not that, and things can be done. But I'll let Gemma talk to you about
I love that. Regressions are, it's such a hot topic, right? Like if you search regressions, it's one of our most asked questions. And Eve's right, you know, beyond the 4-month regression, there isn't a biological regression. Of course, sleep can regress at any time. And I think, like Eve said, we like to label things so that we can understand them and we have an excuse or a reason for why things are so difficult, because it's much harder to look inward and say, okay, what am I doing? Because you're just surviving, and that's okay. But we label, you know, the amount of times in our inbox, and we get between 100 and 150 messages a day, without exaggerating. That is the volume of messages that we receive through Calm and Bright. And they'll say, I'm in the 8-month regression, the 9-month. And we respond with a voice note or with a message to say, it's so hard when sleep regresses. And of course, like Eve said, it can regress for illness, teething, house moves, holidays, siblings. So it can regress, but it's not a biological regression. The only one that is scientifically is the 4-month one. And like Eve said, even some babies at 4 months aren't impacted. What we know from the evidence that we've been collecting anecdotally over the last 14 years is that if sleep is relatively good before the 4-month mark, babies are less impacted by the regression. And things that you can do to help with that are using our gentle steps, which isn't sleep teaching. It's just giving tiny bits of early opportunity for sleep. But the 4-month sleep regression is real. Like I said earlier, we're seeing the development of circadian rhythm genes, which are the cycles between day and night. That doesn't exist before then. And the production of melatonin, which is good and amazing. And we want melatonin. It's the sleepy hormone. But when it arrives, it can really wreak havoc. And that is why parents will say, at 12 weeks, we were starting to get those kind of 4-hour stints, 5-hour stints, and it stopped. Well, that is why. So we do acknowledge the 4-month one as a very real one. But other regressions, we will just give you some love and support as to unpicking, why is that actually happening? What is that regression happening for? And then we can help you.
I love that. In a world where we want to fix a problem, I love the fact that you're like, it's not a problem, it's a biological norm, but actually there are steps that we can take to make things smoother for everybody.
Yes.
You're giving me hope, guys. You're giving me hope that this baby number 2 thing is going to be okay.
It really is.
Now, one of the things I really want to ask you guys, because I can see why it's so important having started to work through it, but what made you decide to introduce your 0 to 6 nurture plan into your support packages? Because I know traditionally you were kind of 6 months up to 4 or 5 years of age, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now we're starting earlier. Tell me why.
We are. And this all started when a woman came into our inbox 3 years ago, a mother who was exhausted, and her baby was 9 weeks old, and she'd been told by a sleep consultant to stop feeding through the night. And she was absolutely on her knees. And when I talk about this, I still get goosebumps, because she was broken emotionally. She was still physically recovering from a really difficult birth, and it broke our hearts. And I put it to Eve, I spoke to the team, and we just decided that there was a massive gap in the market for nurture. And it's almost an anti-sleep teaching plan, in that, yes, our gentle steps are in there that you can use from 12 weeks, but it's everything that we needed. It's got advice in from our Calm and Bright midwives. It's got advice about, like Eve said, riding the waves. And we just noticed that this was missing. And when we wrote Nurture, I sent it to this woman before it had even been published, having given her all of the advice that is now in Nurture. And she said it changed her life. And she's got 3 children now. And she's got twins. So she had her baby and then she's had twins, and all of her children are the same babies. They've always had the same mother. But she said with the twins, it was such a different experience because of everything that she was told. And because it's just like I said, it's everything we needed. It helps you to relax and to hold space for yourself and to talk about the norms. And so it is missing. And that's what nurture is.
It's definitely Gemma's baby. She's been talking about it even longer than 3 years, saying, I wish there was something we could give parents to take the pressure off, but we were so busy that we could
Mm,
never do anything
mm,
with it. And I do remember her saying, wouldn't it be amazing with all the pressure that the incredible NHS is under, if
mm,
somebody had a plan that wasn't a plan, that was go easy on yourself, here's what you
mm,
can do, but also don't worry about it, it'll be
mm,
fine. And Gemma had this dream of nurture calls where you'd have a pediatric nurse, a midwife, basically child health and development experts, as well as infant sleep consultants, who you could phone up, and they're
mm,
called nurture calls, and we have them. And so I love that
mm.
the thing that Gemma dreamed about for so long is now a thing, and it's very much Gemma's area. I love. So Gemma was talking earlier about 6, 7 months. I'm like in my head going, nope, my favorite is 10 months to 2.5,
Yeah,
3 years. I love, and even beyond, I love the older ones, and Gemma loves the baby. So it's handy as it
yeah.
really is.
It was a good combo, a good mix.
And that makes perfect sense because Gem's background's all pediatric nursing. So you see, I guess, the parents in that early
Mhm.
stage struggling. So
Mhm.
you're like, what is there for
Yeah,
parents? Like nothing,
yeah,
which is
No,
yeah,
what's
not
so
enough.
powerful. That
Yeah.
education support, isn't it? It's not like a plan, you've got to do this. It's that
Mm.
education support and empowerment to actually understand your baby and the
yeah,
physiological norm of that
yeah.
massive
Yes.
time.
That's what I
And
love
to
about what
respect your
you do,
needs.
Pip, because I love everything
Yeah.
that you do with your courses and the empowering and the evidence base and the fact that you're an NHS midwife. And I love everything that you're doing, in a different way to us, like in regards to midwifery and birth journeys and postpartum stuff. Amazing.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And actually, that lady that you were talking about, and I'm sure you get loads of similar messages of different contexts, but actually that's really dangerous advice. And I
Mm.
think this is where,
Mm.
we're all on social media. It's great in some aspects, but also social media is unregulated, and that does
Mm.
make it for desperate, vulnerable new parents a really dangerous space. So I think it's really important that we have people like yourselves that are actually qualified and
Mm.
experienced. And like you say, you've got Jen with your pediatric nursing, and you've got midwives on board, and experienced professionals within
Mm.
your ethos, so that
Yes.
parents know actually they can go somewhere where it's safe and
Safe is so
supportive and
important.
non-judgmental, because not feeding a
Mm.
9-week-old baby through the night is not an okay thing to be doing.
No.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you're amazing. I'm very grateful. You were probably the reason that my husband's allowing us to expand the family. So big thanks from us. Everyone that comes on the podcast, I ask for 3 top tips. You can share them, have 3 of your own. It's a free for all. Go for it.
Do you want to start, Jen?
Yeah, my favorite one, and I've already spoken about this in this pod episode, is just to drown out the noise in any area, whether you have a newborn baby, a toddler, a teenager. Just tune into what feels right for you, because that is your compass and that will nearly always be right.
Yeah. And I would definitely add just those nap gaps that I said earlier on, keeping on top of the nap gaps, keeping aware of the nap gaps is massive. And many parents have actually attributed all their sleep stuff being worked out just based on that. So that is a really, really big thing as well.
Amazing. And in terms of finding the nurture plan on your website, which is linked in the episode description, is there anywhere else you want to signpost listeners to that are in that newborn period with sleep?
I think the Instagram page has so much free advice. That's our kind of home.
And great
Um,
dancing.
Yeah, well, a bit
I
of
love ease
fun,
dancing.
took me years to be myself on here, because I thought when I first started, I was like, people want me to be a very serious and professional sleep consultant. And then I started to realize that little bits of me were slipping in, and now we're just literally show up just as we are. And it's great because we've got a whole community that have connected with,
Yeah.
you know, different elements of our personalities and our way of doing things. And I'm Mrs. Chaos, and some people feel a bit better about themselves when they see that and all of that. So, but now, yes, you will find very real, very tangible, very helpful advice on the Instagram as well. And we're always here. Like, it doesn't matter if you get a plan or not. We're just here, genuinely here. And hopefully they'll find the materials we put out, you know, just validating and guilt busting. That's the plan.
Yes. And can we offer a little nurture discount? Are we allowed to do that, boss, or not?
Yeah. Oh, are you asking me? I'm not the boss. Ask Eve.
Ask you.
Do what you want, love. Do what you want.
Yeah, let's offer a nurture discount to anyone watching this episode exclusively for Pip's podcast. So just we'll sort that out.
Amazing. Ladies, thank you so much. You are absolute heroes. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. And as I say, if you are a new mum or an expectant parent that actually wants to get ahead of the game, which is always a smart move when it comes to this topic, then do head over to the episode description to find all of those links that we just spoke about.